Before we hit the road, let's make sure your car is safe. Yes, you're all clear. Before we hit the road, let's make sure your car is safe. Why don't we get in?
Kyle just finished a project for his high school media class. The project is a video about how to pass the driving test. His classmates went for a drive with a DMV examiner to learn about the rules of the road. The examiner gave them a lot of information. Kyle learned a great deal while editing the project. He was so confident that he scheduled an appointment to take his driving test as soon as he turned 16. Let's see how he did.
Okay, turn off your engine, please.
So how'd I do?
Well, you made a few mistakes.
Mistakes? But I learned so much making the video, and I studied the DMV handbook.
Studying the handbook is great, and I really enjoyed your video, by the way. But there's more to being a good driver. You need to be able to apply your knowledge behind the wheel.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So I passed, though, right?
Well, the mistakes you made weren't serious, but you did make more than what is allowed for passing. I'm so sorry, Kyle.
I didn't pass? I can't believe it. What happened?
There are just some things you need to work on. And you know what? We can go over them right now if you like. It'll really help on your next test.
Yeah, I guess I could use the help.
I'll tell you what, while you were making your video, we made one too. We talked to DMV examiners about why some people don't do well on driving tests. And it turns out there's some common mistakes like the ones you made. Shall we take a look?
Yeah, sure, I'm ready.
Okay, let's go.
I was in an accident one time, and it was for changing lanes. The young lady that I took out failed to check her blind spot, and she signaled. She looked in her mirror, but she didn't see the car in the blind spot. Needless to say, we ended up in a little fender bender. There's three things you got to do when you change lanes. You have to do it in that order because there's a certain procedure. You let your signal run, and while it's running, you look in your mirror. Then once you've made sure that there's nothing there, you merge over and you're safe.
A lane change should be just a really simple thing. You have your blinker on, you look in the mirror, you look over your shoulder, and you did everything right, and you see that there's a vehicle there, well then turn your signal light off, go down the road, try again later. It's that simple.
Sometimes you could be doing a really great job, even though you have a signal, you're telling everybody what you're doing next. The other guy just may not care, and he might go in anyways. Before you know it, you're trying to avoid sideswiping a vehicle that's there. If an applicant approaches a right turn, there's a bicycle lane, and they're approaching, they have their signal on, they're just looking straight, they don't look in the mirror, they don't look over the shoulder, that is a critical error. If they approach a left turn, entering the center left turn lane, and they signal, and that's all they do, that before they enter, they don't look, that's another critical error. So those will automatically cause them to fail.
Any lane change requires that you signal, check your mirrors, and check your blind spot. This includes merging into another lane when your lane ends, leaving a curb when pulling into traffic, merging into a bike lane, or merging into a center turn lane.
At this particular stoplight, we want to make a left turn, and then when the light turns green and we have oncoming traffic, sometimes the applicant doesn't realize that they have to wait for oncoming traffic before they can make their left turn.
If they have a green protected arrow, then they know that the car that's coming is supposed to stop. So when they see a solid green light, they think of the rule of the green arrow. They think, okay, My light is green, I'm going to go, this guy should be stopping, and he doesn't stop. When it's a green signal and you're going to make a left turn, you have to yield to the car that's coming.
You need to edge out into the middle of the intersection, wait for all oncoming traffic to go through, whether they're turning or going straight, and wait for the pedestrians to cross. Then complete your left turn in a safe manner.
Don't worry if you're in the intersection when the light turns red. You've entered legally on a green light, so other traffic has to wait for you to clear before they can proceed.
Some of the most common mistakes that drive test applicants make are crosswalks. Okay? When you come to an intersection, they go right in the crosswalk, and next thing you know, there's 2-3 people standing, on the corner wanting to cross. The whole point of the crosswalk is you have to stop behind the line. Then you check for pedestrians, right or left, and then if there's no pedestrians, you can move up into the crosswalk after that, so you can see around the corner. And you look, and then if everything's good, you keep going.
You need to understand the right-of-way, who turns, who changes, who goes, who stops. There's nothing there to help you to say, okay, if the car on your right gets there first, then he goes first. You have to already know that, ahead of time. And the way you drive will tell whether or not you understand the right-of-way, so you need to make sure that you understand.
The biggest mistakes I'll see is they won't make complete stops, or they will just kind of come up, look, and roll right through the stop.
And people think that they've paused or that they've rolled to a stop and there's nobody in the intersection, and that's enough. But we're not called to mark it if it's enough. We're called to mark it if it's not done at all.
Stopping over the limit lines is another big one, because again, they feel they're looking to see if it's clear, especially on right turns. They want to pull up and see if it's clear to make that right turn, so they fail to make their proper stop behind the limit line and check first to see if anyone needs to cross.
I would say 90% of the people out there taking drive tests are extremely confused with that limit line. And we want to get it out there that all they need to do is stop, look left and right for pedestrians. If there are none, creep up. If they cannot see traffic, creep up so that they can see traffic better. And then from that point, make their turns.
A lot of times there are school buses on our particular route, and our applicant will just drive right through with the red lights on. You have children crossing, and that's an automatic fail because they didn't stop. Whether they're on the same side of the bus or the opposite side of the bus, you have to stop until those red lights go off.
The most common reason in our drive test that causes a critical error on a drive test is usually the red arrow, making a right turn against a red right turn arrow on our specific route. And usually they do that safely. They will stop and they'll look, and it'll be done safely. However, it is illegal and it's not correct. You are to come to a complete stop and not attempt to move. You're supposed to hold your position until the light turns green.
When you have a double left turn lane, you can get into the inside lane or the outside lane. Now, when you make your left turn on a green light, if you commit to that inside left turn lane, you have to make sure that you stay and end in your inside left turn lane. If you're on the outside lane, you can end in either lane to the outside.
They're so used to making that left turn and merging all the way to the far lane that when it becomes a double turning lane, now it's designated lane to designated lane, they don't tend to do the turn correctly.
If they're on the inside lane, they will usually in the middle of the intersection cross over to the outside lane without checking for traffic in that lane, and vice versa. If they're on the outside lane, they tend to cross over on the inside lane and cause a problem there. And those are critical errors.
Make yourself aware of speed limits everywhere you go, because speed is a big factor. If you go 10 miles under the speed limit or 10 miles over the speed limit, you're going to fail. And of course, depending on the traffic flow, we can understand, or the weather conditions, you are going to have to go a little slower sometimes, but there are times when as soon as you get on this road that the speed limit is 50 miles per hour, you're going to have to step on the gas.
Going through school zones, there's a misconception about what speed you should be traveling at during a school zone. You know, they always ask me, what does a sign mean when it says 25 when children are present? And I basically tell them it means just that, okay? Present, if they're there, okay? If you can see them, that means they're present. So that means you should be at 25.
If there is no one around, then we expect them to go the speed limit, which is 40 miles per hour.
People who come in for their driving test and have not actually prepared for their driving test, we'll demonstrate that on the road. When we get an ambulance, an individual sometimes panics and they don't know what to do, so they either just stop in their lane or they'll just continue on like they don't hear it.
They're nervous, so they'll come and they'll get that tunnel vision. They're not thinking about what they're doing. They're just kind of focused on one thing rather than taking it all in, seeing the whole situation and reacting to the road conditions at that time.
I just had one recently over at the railroad crossing where we were stopped and the individual actually stopped beyond the marker indicated by the limit line, and what they did was they waited, and so I had to talk them through it. We're going to look left and right, see how close that train is, because we're going to be hit, quite frankly, so we need to get out of that position.
Some applicants have trouble with their ability to control the vehicle, such as backing up in a straight line.
They think I'm backing in a straight line and they have to really move the steering wheel. Well, really moving the steering wheel really moves the vehicle, and that's how we end up hitting curbs, going up on top of curbs.
Hitting the curb is a disqualification on the test. Also, when backing up, turn your head to look behind you.
We have an awful lot of people who do that, who look right out the driver window while they're reversing their car, and that's an automatic fail, and it should be, because that's pretty dangerous. If somebody crosses the back path of your car, you nailed them.
Get the handbook, study material, find out what is going to be required on the drive test, and prepare yourself for that. Get out there and drive. The best way to prepare is the actual practical experience. So get out there, experience different road conditions. If you live in a real rural community, go downtown.
And that way when they come in, they are comfortable and they're not trying anything new out there.
And you lost another point for slowing down unnecessarily at an intersection.
Oh, I remember that. It was because when I went up to the crosswalk, I thought there was a stop sign there, too.
It sounds like maybe you weren't scanning enough to see that there was no traffic control in your direction.
I guess not. But it seems like whenever I do go to a crosswalk, there's either a stop sign or something there.
In some areas, yes. This area just happened to be a little different.
So, would it still be bad to slow down anyway, just to be on the safe side?
Well, in this situation, Kyle, if someone had been behind you, it could have been hazardous for you to slow down for no apparent reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, so far, we've gone over areas in which people tend to be unprepared. The next few reasons are specific traffic violations that show up frequently on driving tests. Let's take a look.
One of the things that does affect a driving test is when an applicant appears in a vehicle that they just borrowed for that day for the driving test. This does affect their test from the beginning to the end. At the beginning of a drive test, we ask the applicant to locate certain items in their vehicle, and when they borrow a vehicle, they don't know where these items are.
Well, say for instance, it's a rainy day and we're driving along and you don't turn your windshield wipers on. Well, I want you to be the one to turn them on your own. So I'll wait a few minutes, but then if we are driving and I'm thinking, okay, I can barely see out of the windshield, I'm sure that my driver can't, I will eventually say, please turn your windshield wipers on. And when that happens, basically the drive test is over.
Sometimes I get applicants that come in that have never driven this car before. They're just not familiar with their brake. Different vehicles have different sensitivity, as far as how much pressure to apply. and sometimes they apply too much pressure. Now you're doing this type of thing, you know, you come back with your neck sore. You know, so, and now they're getting points deducted because they're not braking smoothly.
Or it could be just that they're unfamiliar with the car because parking brakes are in different areas in vehicles. The car they're used to has a handbrake, but the car they're in is controlled by the foot, and I've had them reach down and try and push it with their hand, and I'm thinking, no, look how it is, and what do you need to do? And then I've literally had to say, you put your foot on there and push it down, because they really don't know.
Come in with a car that you've been practicing with. You're already nervous for the drive test, and you don't need more things to complicate the drive test itself. Make it simple as possible on yourself. Bring the same car. That way your comfort level is always better.
They just drive forward. They won't see pedestrians, they don't see cars. We have a little warning dip sign, which it says 20 miles per hour. A lot of times they won't even see the sign, which means that they're not scanning. They have tunnel vision. So they're just driving straight through, and they'll get marked a point. Wouldn't be fail, but it would be a point to go through that dip more than 20 miles per hour.
There's a tailgater. We'll notice them in the side mirror, but they'll be driving looking straight ahead, not paying attention. The guy behind is flashing his lights, and the driver doesn't even notice. When I drive out there, I'm always constantly looking. I'm always thinking ahead. Just because you have the right-of-way, it doesn't mean others are going to let you have it.
You don't know what other cars or what the drivers of the other cars see. You can't really depend on the other cars to make the proper decision for you, so you've got to be on the lookout. When you're approaching an intersection, you should be what we call scanning, both left and right. Right turns, you have to be aware of pedestrians that might be on your immediate right side, or pedestrians that are coming towards you from ahead. Left turns, you've got to be aware of traffic that's moving into your path. Residential areas, there's lots of parked cars. There might be kids playing in the street, people pulling out of driveways, but lots of cars in a DMV parking lot. People leaving, people coming.
And if an individual does not turn and look at something that may be a potential hazard, the examiner again will tell them, you need to slow down, that car doesn't look like it's going to stop, let's be prepared for that. And so most of the time they're like, what car? You need to keep those eyes moving all the time.
And I would say that that's the most important part of driving, is the scanning, because basically that's what's going to save your life.
Some people think that being extra cautious will help them pass their driving test. Caution is good, but too much can create traffic hazards.
Being overcautious on a driving test is not good, because it does affect the overall flow of traffic. That's a problem because it seems that when at a four-way stop, that when they come to their stop, they don't want to go ahead and go on their turn. They'd rather wait for everybody else to go and then take their turn. And the only problem with that is that it confuses the other drivers. And there's a nice rhythm usually going at four-way stops, and then they will take that rhythm out and then cause people to try to decide, are they part of this game or are they just going to sit there? And so then the examiner will usually have to say, you need to go on your turn.
You have to be assertive. You have to accept right-of-way when it is yours. Of course, make sure that it is safe to proceed. But when you're overly cautious, you tend to hesitate, and that confuses other traffic.
When they're pulling out into traffic and they're waiting for cross traffic to be clear, they tend to wait until there is no cars rather than just clear. And sometimes I think I need my binoculars or a telescope to see that oncoming car, but they will hold. And as a result, if they keep doing that, then we have to tell them, you need to go ahead and continue.
When an examiner intervenes like this on a test, it affects your score. If it's serious enough to be considered a critical error, then it's a cause for failing the test.
People drive too slow because they've been told by friends, relatives, just go ahead and drive slower than you normally do, and that way you're safe no matter what. But what constitutes a critical error on a drive test is driving too slow, and that's usually 10 miles or more under the speed limit for no apparent reason when driving conditions are good.
Driving in an unfamiliar area can be difficult, especially if you're taking a test. If you come across a traffic element you haven't encountered before, such as a roundabout, it may be difficult to know what to do.
They don't know which way to go. They've never seen it. They think it's just a circle in the middle of the road. I've seen them just cut clear across to the left instead of going around it. They'll just sit there and look at you like, what am I doing here? Which way am I supposed to go? So, I mean, like, you know, for somebody that's never seen it, it's something difficult.
Unfamiliar elements are not the only problem. Some areas have situations that require more careful observation.
We are located in a commercial area, but what a lot of people don't realize is that there is no speed limit sign posted anywhere on the road where this office is located, so they tend to go a lot faster than they should. They don't realize, and so at the end of the drive test, if it's someone who just who drove too fast on this road, then I let them know, you know, I ask them, so what do you think the speed limit is on this road? And they usually say 35, 45, and I say, why is that? Why do you think that? And they'll tell me, well, it's commercial. And I say, but where's the speed limit sign? And then they're like, well, I didn't see it. I say, exactly. So unless otherwise posted, the speed limit should be 25, right? And they're like, oh, right.
Come out a little sooner and drive the area. Look what the speed limit signs are. Look at what type of intersections are out there. Is there a lot of pedestrians? Is there high congested areas? Are there railroad tracks? Are there different things that you may have to make certain adjustments for?
Go into the area, drive around, get a feel of everything. It'll really help you calm down.
So, the examiners talk about points and critical errors. How's that work?
This is what happens. The examiner is there to observe how safely you drive and how you obey traffic laws. If you do something incorrect, such as not scanning or checking a blind spot, but it doesn't pose a serious safety hazard, that's a 1-point deduction. You can lose a certain number of points and still pass. But if you lose more than that number, then you don't pass.
Like I did.
Now, a critical error is something that involves a more serious hazard. If you demonstrate that you don't have good control of the vehicle, if you don't understand traffic laws, or if you don't know how to respond appropriately to a traffic situation, these are usually critical errors. If the examiner has to intervene to tell you what to do, or another driver has to take evasive action to prevent an accident, that's definitely a critical error. And it only takes one critical error to fail the test.
Ouch. That's great information. I can relate to a lot of those reasons. But there is one reason for failing that you didn't mention.
What's that?
Being nervous. That probably affected me the most on my test.
You're right, Kyle. You're right. Being nervous can affect your performance. In fact, that's probably a contributing factor for most of the reasons we've talked about. And you can't help getting nervous, but there are some things you can do to minimize it.
Like what?
There are 3 things. Practice, practice,
Practice. Yeah.
The more experience you have driving, the more confident you'll be and the less nervous you'll feel. It also helps to come in a car that you've driven a lot and that you're comfortable with. And of course, you want to familiarize yourself with the area around the DMV before taking the test.
You're right. I need to practice more. I guess I was in too much of a hurry to get my license.
Most people are. And DMV wants you to get your license too. That's why we made this video.
Well, I appreciate the help. Now I know what to do before my next test.
You're going to do really well, Kyle.
I think so too. Thanks to you, of course.
I'm glad I could help. You take care.
Sure thing.
And drive safely.
All right.